Curtis Helm is a principal restoration ecologist, and Chris Collins is a restoration program lead, both with the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership. And they're going to give us an update on Steigerwald Wildlife Refuge, which is scheduled to reopen late this month.
Okay. Is everyone seeing that? Good to go? Okay, awesome. All right, well, thanks for the introduction. And yeah, thanks for having us. Actually having me, sorry, it'll just be me tonight. Curtis had a long day in the field, so he's gonna take the evening off, and I will share with you everything I know about the project. Excuse me. And we've got a quick little presentation, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. So yeah, definitely write them down, put them in the chat, whatever format works for you guys, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions at some point during the presentation. So let's see, yeah, my name is Chris Collins, work for the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership. We are a nonprofit. We have spoken to this group before, so probably a lot of friendly and familiar faces on here, but I guess this time we're virtual, so I can't see you all. But anyway, good to be back. So I wanted to give you an overview of what we've accomplished so far with the Steigerwald project. We are so close to being done. And the exciting thing is the refuge will reopen on May 1st. So a little sneak peek here, and then hopefully you all will get out and see everything for yourselves before long. So real quick, I always go over a bit of site history. For a lot of you, that's probably something you already know, but hopefully it'll be new information for a few folks, and it's a good reminder of the context and how the site used to function before it was developed. We'll go over current conditions, or what the site was like before we started the project, give you a quick little overview of the project, including where we are, its status, talk a little bit about our monitoring plans and some of the carbon sequestration work we've been doing there. And then, like I said, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So in the picture you see here, just FYI, this is Gibbons Creek. Can everyone see my cursor? Hopefully you can. Yes, okay, great. So this little patch of willows right here is that little detention basin just to the south of the parking lot. So just on the other side of these willows is the parking lot. So this is, and you can see SR 14 right here, the bridge. So you're looking upstream at SR 14, upstream Gibbons Creek towards SR 14. So obviously there's no more LFA canal, things have changed a lot. So I'll tell you how we got there in just a sec. Everybody I think here knows I always start off with the location of the site, but I think everybody is familiar with it. We're obviously just east of Washougal, right on the boundary between the city of Washougal and the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area, which is one of the things that makes this site one of the many things that makes this site so unique is that it's really at that urban wild interface. Historically, this is what the site used to look like, and I love these pictures. I think they're so interesting. This top picture is from 1939. It's a photo we got from the Corps of Engineers, and it shows the site obviously before the levee was built. The levee was built in the 60s. And so this shows what the site, how it functioned when it was actually an active part of the floodplain. So the connection was down here at the west end of the site. The Columbia River would come up and it would backwater a large part of the floodplain. For reference, this is about 600 acres of inundated floodplain that you see in this photo. So kind of a calm, backwater, great for waterfowl, great for juvenile salmon rearing. It's a really nice active part of the floodplain. And I should say our project site is not the entire area. Obviously, a lot of this developed as a port, but our project site is outlined in red. Fast forward to the 50s. This is what the site looked like still largely undeveloped. Obviously, there's been a lot of clearing for agriculture and whatnot. But this is what it looked like in a low water condition. So you can see Steigerwald Lake right here. You can see what we call Straub Lake here. The Straub Road is here. And Gibbons Creek flowing into the site from the north with a big alluvial fan, some nice willow bottoms right here. And just really cool, you can see a lot of the channels and different little habitat features. And again, this is Gibbons Creek and its alluvial fan. We'll talk about that a lot tonight. It's a really unique feature of the site. So fast forward to more or less present day. This is a photo that I think was taken in late 1900 or 1990s. I'm sorry. But yeah, basically the conditions of the site right before we started construction. So again, site is outlined in red. You've got the Columbia River forming the southern border of the site here. The levee forming the southern border of the site right along the north bank of the Columbia River. So that was the main impact at the site. Gibbons Creek, of course, discharges to the interior of the site. A lot of flooding caused by Gibbons Creek. So the levee solved the Columbia River flood problems, protected the site from that, allowed for all this development here by the port, which of course continues marching towards the east. And parts of the city, including their wastewater treatment plant, all that development was facilitated by the levee. But it also created some flooding problems, ironically enough, because Gibbons Creek discharged to the interior. The port had to pump all that water out. They couldn't pump at 100% of Gibbons' flood rate. So when Gibbons was really flooding, often it was up around 700-800 cubic feet per second, as much as 1,000 or so, and the port could only pump about 200 cubic feet per second. So they're pumping, roughly 20 to 30% of a good flow. So when that happens, they can't keep up. Water is discharging to the interior of the levee, and it starts to build up and has flooded out part of the industrial park. So in response to that, they built the elevated canal. Everyone's familiar with that. Diverting water into the elevated canal that flows down over the fish ladder. And that's how they separated Gibbons Creek from the site. Of course, it didn't work very well. Didn't solve the flooding problems, but it was at least partially successful in getting salmon back up into the watershed. And lamprey as well, which we'll talk about in a second. So problems, fish access. Fish ladder that was probably a great design back in the 90s, but we've learned so much about fish passage that we now know it does not meet current criteria, and it's not passable for juveniles, and is only passable at certain times for adults. So a poorly functioning fish ladder, providing access only to Gibbons Creek, not to the floodplain. We cut off the hydrology, and so a lot of invasive species. Everyone here has been to Steigerwald, I'm sure, seen all the reed canary grass. That's a pretty typical story with these floodplains. When you farm them, you ditch them, you cut off the hydrology, you get this explosion of our good friends, reed canary grass and blackberry and thistle and teasel. So pretty poor habitat conditions. And like I said, the flooding. This is actually a FEMA map for the interior of the levee system. So they're mapping, again, Gibbons Creek flood extents. And what you see is that the flooding could be so bad at times that they actually mapped the wastewater treatment plant and parts of the industrial park as being inside Gibbons Creek's 100-year flood zone. So not only that, but the refuge very frequently would have to dredge Gibbons Creek, a diversion structure, in order to maintain its capacity. So a lot of problems, not only with the ecology of the site, but with actual flood management and just managing that whole levee system. So what did we do about it? What are we in the process of doing about it, I guess I should say. So the first thing is, this is a concept map. So this is what the project, kind of a summary of the project. A lot going on, but you can boil it down to 6 basic elements. The first is we built 2 setback levees. So one here on the west end, and everybody's seen that driving out Highway 14, and the other on the east end here. Those are the exact same height, geometry, dimensions, everything as the old levee. So they provide the same level of flood protection for Columbia River floods to all the port, the city, and the private infrastructure. What those setback levees, building those allowed us to do is remove 2.25 miles of existing levee. So all the existing levee that's located from this point here all the way down to here. So between the 2 setback levees, that was all removed. So that reconnects the Columbia River to the site. And then to reconnect Gibbons to the site, we removed the diversion structure, the elevated canal, and the fish ladder. So now Gibbons Creek flows down, naturally reconnected to the floodplain, no more infrastructure in the way, flows down through Steigerwald Lake and out these channels to the Columbia River. So when we did this, everybody's flood risk stayed the exact same, or it actually went down. So Columbia River flood risk stayed the same. Gibbons Creek flood risk decreased a lot, an incredible amount actually, because Gibbons is no longer connected to the interior of the levee system. It's connected directly to the floodplain, so it doesn't discharge over here anymore. So Gibbons Creek flood risk went way down. The only exception is this little section of Highway 14. So it is now more susceptible to Columbia River floods. So to mitigate that risk, we raised, in the summer of 2020, we raised the highway up to the Columbia River's 500-year flood elevation, which is kind of a technical modeling term, but it's about 5 feet above the peak, the highest stage of the 1996 flood. So it's way up there. So it's a pretty conservative level of flood protection for the highway. We raised a little section of the highway. We're now in the process of rebuilding the whole trail network. That'll be done by May 1st. And we just finished about 250 acres of riparian planting about 2 weeks ago. So a lot of cottonwoods, a lot of willow, a lot of ash, a lot of cedar, Oregon grape, spirea, all those native plants that we see in riparian areas. It was about 510,000 plants total. So a huge, huge planting effort across about 25% of the site. So that's a quick summary of the project. This is what it looks like from the air. You've got the elevated canal, of course, and then the existing levee. Steigerwald Lake is here. And of course, Highway 14 and the old parking lot. So the first thing we did was we raised SR14. And then we started building our new setback levees. This is the west levee that we're showing here. That allowed us to remove the existing levee. Then we removed the diversion, the elevated canal, and the fish ladder, which allowed us to reconnect Gibbons to the floodplain and directly out to the river. And then finally, we built a new parking lot. So that new parking lot is going to be right across from 45th Street right here. So just east of the wastewater treatment plant. And now when you park, you'll walk over to the levee. You walk out the top of this levee. And then when you get to the river, if you go to the west, you'll continue on the levee trail, just like you did before. But if you go east, you'll drop off the levee down onto the natural floodplain grade, and you'll take this trail winding into and out of the refuge for quite a ways. The trail is about a mile longer than it was historically, so it extends quite a bit farther east, crosses some new channels, goes through the restored forest. It'll be, I think, a pretty cool and like just a much more diverse experience when the next time you visit. So benefits, definitely improves the trail system. It's about a mile longer, a couple new bridges. We've got a lot of the public out for plantings, students and volunteers. Like I said, on the flood risk side, it removes the city, the port, private infrastructure from the flood zone. It's about a $23 million project, so a lot of jobs for sure. When we first started, the economy is great now, but when we first started 2 years ago, COVID had just, shut everything down and unemployment was in a free fall. So this was a really well-timed job. It was honestly really like satisfying to employ a lot of people for a couple of years in like safe, just outdoor work, construction work. It was nice to be able to provide that economic boost to the local community. And then habitat, which is obviously what we're mostly interested here, is we reconnected 965 acres of new floodplain. We restored unobstructed fish passage, so no more fish ladder, just a natural stream connecting the floodplain out to the river. So that's great for salmon and lamprey and other species. We reestablished about, like I said, 250 acres of native riparian forest. That's all been planted. So everybody cross your fingers that we don't have another hot, dry summer. We need some good rain to get all those plants established this year. We created about 115 acres of new floodplain wetlands. And then we, just by restoring the hydrology to the site. So with Gibbons Creek now flowing through and inundating a big part of the site, the Columbia River flooding it. So without actually directly touching a lot of the wetlands out there, I really think through time, we're going to start to see a lot more diverse plant communities. We'll never get rid of the reed canary grass, but we will sure like beat it back a little bit and start to see more wapato, rushes, sedges, some of the native plants kind of popping through those reed canary grass monocultures. And then my background is in fisheries, so this is, I think, really cool to me, but also is really important for waterfowl and a lot of other species. One of the neat things about this project is there really is very little floodplain habitat, such important habitats, and there's really very little of it in this part of the Lower Columbia River. So what I mean by that is between the Willamette confluence all the way up to Bonneville Dam, very little floodplain for two reasons. One is upstream of or east of Steigerwald, it's in the gorge. So it's just naturally a constrained part of the river. So you don't find a lot of floodplain historically. And then downstream of Steigerwald, our floodplain has just really been developed. It's the ports, it's, IKEA and the airport and all that development. So we've levied off and we've developed a lot of our floodplain. So this project, not only is it exciting because it's a large project, but because there's such little floodplain available now, that it actually increases the amount of accessible floodplain between the Willamette confluence and Bonneville Dam by almost 20%, by about 19%. You can see it here. There's different ways to measure that, but by about 19% if you look at the 1-year flood. So it's a big project, and I think it's really impactful because of the amount of habitat it provides in a part of the river that doesn't have much of it. And that's important for fish because juvenile salmon, as they're out migrating through the Lower Columbia, they are looking to get out of the river, and they want to get away from the high velocities, the really strong currents. They want to get away from the predators, from all the smallmouth bass and other fish, that pike minnow that are trying to eat them, and they want to get on the floodplain because there's a lot better food and it's a lot easier to hang out and swim safely. So when they're doing that on the floodplain, this is what they look like, and when they're in the river, this is what they look like. This is from a study down in California, the Sacramento River, and after 3 weeks of rearing salmon in net pens on the floodplain versus the river, this was the difference in their condition. These are juvenile Chinook. So pretty remarkable difference to a lot of species, a lot of native species, salmon in particular. So the schedule, let's see, we initiated this project in 2013, and that's when we started all the planning and the design and the permitting. It took us 6 long years to get to construction, but we started construction in August of 2019, and we are so close to being done. We got rained out last fall. So what we'll have done by May 1st is we'll have all the trails done. We'll have the plantings done. The levees are totally done. And 99.5% of the internal grading is done. We've got a couple access roads that we just ran out of time and could not remove them last year, and the old parking lot. So, everything that you guys need to go back and enjoy the refuge is going to be ready for you on May 1st. And then August, we're going to have to close it again for a month, do a little bit of mop up, cleanup work. And then September, early September, probably the first week, we'll be totally done and everybody can go back to enjoying the refuge without any fear of us getting in your way again. Budget, the total cost, construction was about 23 and the total budget was about 31 million. And our funders, BPA is a primary funder, but also Washington Department of Ecology, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then Bonneville Environmental Foundation. So, like I said, we are so close to being done. The major accomplishments, we have completed all of our fish salvage. This is so fascinating. I've done a lot of this over my career, and long story short, we have just, with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and some of the tribes, everybody is really is making now a concerted effort. We've learned so much more about lamprey and exactly how to salvage them. And let me back up, I guess. What I mean by salvage is so much of this work that we do has to occur in the stream, actually in the water. And so to avoid impacting salmon and lamprey, what you do is you go through and you capture as many of the fish as you possibly can, and then relocate them to a different part of the stream where you're not working. So for us, that meant north of Highway 14. Transferred them all up there, and then we dewater the stream and just kind of blow it all up, do all our work, rebuild it, and then once the water comes back on, then we all the fish can re-enter the site. And we were salvaging lamprey this time. So we've learned so much about salvaging lamprey. We actually captured over 45,000 juvenile lamprey. It was just absolutely stunning how many fish we caught out of just one small section of Gibbons Creek. So a really productive little stream. So we completed all that. We removed, like I said, 2¼ miles of existing levee. We completed both of the setback levees. They are completely finished. We've excavated about 110 acres of new wetlands and floodplain channels. We planted over 230 acres. That should be 250. We're done now. We've constructed the new parking lot and the trail that is wrapping up, like I said, this month. And then we removed all that Gibbons Creek infrastructure, the diversion, elevated canal, and fish ladder. So I'll show you a few quick pictures here. This is the west setback levee. So this is what it looked like before we started construction. You can see one of the ports buildings here. And then, excuse me, this is what it looked like in October of last year. So last fall, right when we finished the project. Big, giant levee. And this is what it looks like from the ground. So when you walk up, after you park in the new parking lot, this is one of the new overlooks. It was pretty rough in this picture. It's since been refurbished. But you're on top of the levee here, looking out across Gibbons Creek's alluvial fan. And this is the levee just after it had been hydroseeded. That green is a dye they put in the hydroseed so they can see where they've actually sprayed it all. That's just after the levee had been hydroseeded. And again, you can see that building here of the ports. We had some friends come visit us this winter. They kept the grass mowed for us, a lot of snow geese. The grass and levee really sprouted and grew up super vigorously. It was really nice because we were worried about erosion. And then a friend showed up and mowed it all down for us, but I don't think they actually did much damage. They just kind of kept it clipped pretty short. But I know you folks are all birders, so I threw that in there. It was interesting to see snow geese at the refuge. I think that's a pretty rare occurrence. So this, another aerial view we took with our drone. So here you can see the new parking lot. Again, this is where you'll park. You walk out this little trail here, this little service road. Here's your new restrooms here. We actually relocated the restrooms a little bit farther away from the parking lot, hoping that they wouldn't get vandalized quite as much in the future. Then you walk out along the levee to the river, and then again out this direction. You can see Gibbons Creek reconnected here, no more elevated canal. And then way off in the distance, you can see the east setback levee. So then for reference on this next photo, you can see here, this is, keep an eye on this cottonwood tree, because that is this little stand right here. So this is what the main breach looked like back in 2015, pre-construction. There was no breach, it was a big levee. And then now you've got a nice deep connection, big channel with Gibbons Creek flowing here out to the river. So this channel will have Gibbons Creek in it, perennial year-round flow, and it'll also allow the Columbia River to come up and then backwater the whole site. So speaking of Gibbons Creek, this is really cool, and still it I think fascinates me. The Columbia River is really what's going to flood the site in the freshet, which is snow melt starting around this time of year and extending into early July. Columbia River comes up and it'll backwater the site, flood out 500, 600 acres, depending on the year. But Gibbons Creek is a rain-driven system. Obviously, you folks live here and know that. So it sees its peak not in the spring, but in the wintertime. And at that point, the Columbia River is usually pretty low, not backwatering the site. Gibbons Creek, fairly small drainage, just like 7 or 8 square miles, but really has an incredible impact. So this is modeling that we did back when we were designing the project. And what it showed is that when Gibbons Creek was up around about its 2-year discharge, which is again a technical term, but it's the average stage you see every other year, it would flood about 300 acres of the site all by itself, no input from the Columbia River whatsoever. And honestly, I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't totally believe this when we did the modeling and the assessment back in the design, but back in November, if you guys remember, we had a pretty big rain event. It was around probably about a 10-year precipitation event. Hard to know exactly what that translates to flow in a creek, but a lot of rain, a lot of water in the creek, and there was a lot of water out in the refuge. So this photo was taken when Gibbons Creek was pretty close to its peak for that event. But the Columbia River was still low, not backwatering the site at all. So all this flooding, which is roughly 250 to 300 acres, is solely because of Gibbons Creek. And Steigerwald Lake is, I'm gonna outline it for you, like right here. It's kind of the footprint of Steigerwald Lake, just for reference. So a heck of a lot more water than we saw at the site historically. And we haven't even gotten to the Columbia River spring runoff yet. So really, really interesting to see. Let's see, habitat. This is the Gibbons Creek alluvial fan down here, or the lower part of the fan. Some really nice habitat forming. This part of the site was planted back in 2019, the winter of 19 and 20. That's what that looks like. Again, we've seen, this is kind of cool. I threw this in here again because you guys are birders, but ton of red-winged blackbirds. This is the old parking lot right here. So that little stormwater pond just south of it, all the willows. A lot of blackbirds there, then really all through this alluvial fan. And then here, same flood in November. This is what the upper part of the fan looked like. So the diversion used to be right here. So instead of being channelized through here, the creek can really spread out, form new habitats. And it's just really intended to kind of go everywhere, be kind of a messy, inundated, wetland, floodplain type habitat. And it's happening. It's really cool. Some of the plantings, I think this is super interesting. We planted these. This is a cottonwood. It goes in as a pole, so you can see the diameter when it was planted. So this tree was planted in the winter of it's probably like December of 2019. So about 9 months later, in September, this is what it looked like above ground. And we were really curious how these poles, when they go in, it's like a broomstick, how they would, root out, how they were, developing, accessing, how healthy they were. So we dug one up. And this is what it looked like. It's just fascinating. It looks like kind of almost like a big, janitor's mop or something. All the root systems in this pretty well watered part of the site are really, developing quickly. It's just really cool to see. And gives me a little hope because our summers are getting hotter and drier, and these trees are going to have to adapt somehow. So anyway, that was, I think, kind of an interesting something that we learned during the course of the project. Wapato is another species we're really focused on. Kind of getting short on time here, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit, but we've transplanted a lot of Wapato. For example, in the footprint of the levees, where we had to, scrape off a lot of vegetation to get down to mineral soil, so we can prep the foundation and start, loading it with all that levee soil. Anywhere we hit Wapato, the contractor scooped it up for us, set it off to the side. We picked through it, and then we transplanted all those plants to some of the new wetland habitats. We also seeded a lot of Wapato in. This is what the seed looks like. It's really small and it floats. So we pack it in mud balls and just throw it out in the wetlands. And then we harvested a bunch of tubers. These are what the tubers look like. Really, really remarkably beautiful. So we harvested a bunch from some of the healthy stands, and then we planted them, put some jute mat, like erosion control mat, over top of them to keep, I guess, the swans dig them up. That's what the refuge told us. So we were trying to keep them, swan proof, and hoping that they come back and we get a lot more Wapato out at the site. It's great for wildlife, and obviously it's important culturally. It's important to local tribes. Upper Gibbons Creek, real quick. So this is north of Highway 14. Show you what some of that habitat looks like. This is prior to construction, very channelized, tons of blackberry, tons of ivy, a lot of big cobble. The stream didn't have a floodplain at all. It was just a very U-shaped channel. So you get a lot of, big scour, a lot of energy. So not valuable in the way of salmon and lamprey habitat. Now it's got a big floodplain, some nice willows growing in, wider channel, and the substrate size is appropriate for spawning for both salmon and lamprey. This is what that site, or that part of it, looks like from the air. Again, you can see that port building back here for reference. So reconstructed the channel, built a flood wall, which is the northern part of the levee. Not much of a floodplain here, but there's a big wide floodplain on this side. So when this creek really gets running, you'll see it up and over the banks. It's supposed to do that. That's a good thing. One cool thing, these are some killdeer eggs. I think they were killdeer. I'm pretty sure that's what they were. North of Highway 14 we saw, but I think even more interesting, a dipper. We saw an American dipper in this part of Gibbons Creek. So north of 14, the part that we restored. And according to Alex Chmielewski, this is the first dipper, I think, that had ever been seen at the refuge. So that was pretty cool. I think they're a really interesting bird. And I guess we created the right habitat for them. So it's fun to see a new species showing up at the refuge. Real quick, and we're almost done here. One of the things about these projects is you use a lot of equipment, a lot of fuel, a lot of steel, a lot of concrete, which means there's a lot of carbon emissions. So we've been tracking that very closely. We've also been tracking and trying to increase the number of plants that we're planting. And it looks like both, well, I shouldn't say both, but based solely on the number of plants that we have planted, primarily cottonwood, we will sequester all of our carbon emissions. So that's 400,000 gallons of diesel fuel, That's honestly, I can't remember how much how much steel and concrete, but more than I want to think about. I think it was 1,000 yards of concrete, and I can't remember how much steel. But anyway, all the emissions associated with all that, our plantings across those 250 acres, 510,000 plants, will sequester that amount of carbon in about, the estimate is 8 to 12 years, so roughly 10 years. And that doesn't include volunteer recruitment. We're getting an incredible number of cottonwood seeding in. So it's going to be really interesting to see how some of these new habitats develop, which is natural recruitment. And then finally, we are doing a lot of monitoring. Keep an eye on our website. We publish these reports occasionally, but we're looking at veg, we're looking at sediment accretion, we're looking at temperatures in Gibbons Creek. We're anticipating that summer temperatures will go down. That's a good thing for salmon. We have a pit tag array out there that we're actually will be able to detect tag fish moving in and out of the site. So we'll get an idea of what species are using the site, when they're using it, how long they're using it for. So much data that you can get from fish that have been tagged. So we've got a whole monitoring program going on this site. And then finally, just acknowledgements. Of course, the funders, we mentioned those before, our partners, the port, who owns the levee system and operates it. They've been a great partner, Fish and Wildlife, Friends of the Columbia Gorge, and of course, the Gorge Refuge Stewards. Our prime contractor, they're out of, we use all local firms, which is really awesome. Rachi is out of Vancouver. Really, really solid outfit. We've enjoyed working with them. And then our design and construction management team. And that is all I have. So thanks for hanging in there for this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I didn't pay attention to the chat, so if there's questions in the chat, someone would read them to me. That would be really helpful.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's really awesome to see what's happening at the refuge, and I'm really excited for it to open back up because it's been so long since I've been there.
Yeah, it has been a while.
Okay, and the dipper is really cool. So actually, Randy had a question about the dipper. What month was the dipper seen in? Do you know?
Oh, Randy, it was I don't remember exactly. It was the summer, maybe early fall, but I don't recall the exact month.
That's such a wonderful bird. It's great. I love dippers. Let's see. I guess there was a question about how is the loop trail structured in terms of where it is to the parking lot? Like where does it go around? Sorry, my brain.
Let me go back a few slides here and we can talk through the trail. Yeah, the trail is it's always a little bit hard to explain. So let's see, if we look at this graph here, or this figure, so here's the new parking lot. So you walk up on the new levee, you'll come down the new levee. And then if you head east, there's no more levee, so the trail just is out on the floodplain. And it's up on high ground. I say it down the floodplain, but it's up around like the 50 or 100-year flood level, at least the 50. So it's pretty high. The red tail loop did not change at all. That was, essentially unimpacted by construction. So that is still there. It just connects a little bit sooner into the trail system right here. But anyway, you would continue out east. You'd cross one of the first channels here on this bridge. You come out to a new overlook here. So this is a brand new overlook right on the river. And then you cross the second bridge and you can go all the way down here to this, which is a gate, and that'll be the end of public access. Only the refuge and the port will have access to the east levee. So it's still an out and back. There's no loop other than the red tail loop, which again was really unchanged by construction. So hopefully that answers the question.
One other question about the shape. So can you discuss the reason behind the shape and slope of the new setback levy?
Can I discuss the reason behind the shape and the slope? Yeah, sure. So I guess the short answer is that the Corps told us to build them this way. So the Corps of Engineers, that's how we built them. I can tell you what it is. So this maybe is the best picture. So, over here is to the west, that is the dry side. And this is, of course, to the east, and that's the wet side. So on the dry side, you have a 4-to-1 slope. So this whole slope over here is 4-to-1. And on the east side, it's a little steeper. It's actually 3-to-1. So the water side is steeper. But this is really cool, and you can kind of see this with this dark to light, transition soil color here. It's a steeply sloped levee, but then the grade flattens out. So once you get down to about the level of the 1996 flood, once you get down to that point of the levee, the grade flattens out to about 8-to-1 and eventually 20-to-1. And the reason it does that is levees, you normally protect them with rock. So you just haul in a massive amount of riprap and you blanket the whole water side of the levee with riprap. We didn't want to do that. One, it's really expensive, and two, it's just not compatible with good wildlife habitat or really being part of a refuge. So what we did is we hauled in extra soil, and so there's about 80,000 cubic yards of extra soil. And so you build on top of the levee, or not on top, but on the side slope of the levee, you built this really gently sloping embankment on its water side. And then you plant that with trees and shrubs. And that just forms this natural, wave attenuation, like little mini forest that when you get a high water event and you get wave action, you can actually get up to 3-foot waves. And all that veg and all that soil and that long, rough run up will protect the levees from erosion. So that was a long answer to your question. Hopefully that's what you guys were looking for. But basically the levees are 10 feet wide on the top. They have, a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 side slope. And then they have that big wind wave burn on the water side of them.
That's really cool to hear. Thank you. I understand the levee much better now. Okay, so we've got another question. What is going to be done with the old parking lot area?
So the old parking lot area, that's one of the things we have to do this summer is we'll go back and we'll pull all the rock out of it. And we're going to repurpose that rock to improve some of the interior just maintenance roads. And then we'll disc it up and decompact all the soil, and then we'll plant it with willows and other native species. So it'll be reclaimed as part of the floodplain and really as part of the Gibbons Creek alluvial fan. That's actually kind of cool. We're next winter, we're going to have some volunteer plantings, and we thought that'd be a fun area to have volunteers come and plant, because you can help, reclaim and restore the old parking lot.
Yeah, so we should definitely keep an eye on that for our members if they want to come volunteer.
Absolutely.
So another question, it seems that all the old plantings around the old parking lot are remaining in place. Will that area still be accessible?
The old parking lot will not really be accessible now. I mean, the plantings, they're mostly cottonwoods, willows, dogwoods, stuff like that. They'll stay to the extent that we can avoid impacting them during construction. Yeah, they'll definitely stay, but that area won't be accessible to the public. No.
We have another question about the lamprey. How will you monitor lamprey going forward?
That is not part of our monitoring program, unfortunately, but U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they have their fisheries group in Vancouver is so close by, and they're doing a lot of research on lamprey, and they've been using Gibbons Creek as one of their study sites, and they've been actually collecting fish there to bring back to their lab for analysis. So they are doing some some tracking of Gibbons Creek lamprey, populations. But we unfortunately don't have funding or even the capacity to really do that. They're such a cool fish, though. It's really neat. Like, as a scientist and as a fisheries person, Fish and Wildlife is out there pulling fish out of Gibbons Creek and studying lamprey and learning things and publishing reports or scientific studies on lamprey that they have, some of which they've collected out of Gibbons Creek. It's pretty neat. It's like science in action out there.
Yeah, they're a very basal species too, so you can get a lot of information from them about our evolutionary history. Sorry, my bird screams every time I talk.
That's all right.
Okay, so next question. Will the new trail be inaccessible during flood events?
Let's see. Let's go back to my trail map here. So the levee will be open. If the levee is ever closed because of a flood, it's a giant flood, so you shouldn't be out there anyway. So the levee will be open all the time. Once you get out here, you're on high ground. The red tail loop is on high ground, so that will be totally fine. The only really part of the whole trail system that you might have crossing issues is where it crosses these channels. So here, and then also at the bridges. So you can definitely walk out and around on red tail loop, really no matter what the Columbia River is doing. Once it gets up to like a 10 or a 20-year event, which, we're starting to get in some pretty significant flooding events, then the bridges even themselves could be impacted and could get wet. So the short answer is very infrequently will the trail be closed because of floods. But when you get a real big one, it definitely will have an impact on some of these crossings. So it may be that you can only go as far as this first bridge. I would say that's going to be pretty infrequent, though.
Another question is and I know you said this in your presentation, but when can we walk the refuge again?
When can you walk the refuge in? So the refuge will be open starting May 1st. And it'll be open for the entire month of May, June, and July. And then we have to close it again for about, 4 to 6 weeks, August and the early part of September. And then after that point, we will be completely finished and it'll be reopened permanently starting in early September.
Another question is, are you doing any community science to monitor plantings and wildlife?
That's a really good question. Most of the science is run through our monitoring program. There are some high school students that are doing some vegetation monitoring in partnership with us, but I think that's the only real community monitoring that I'm aware of. Any other monitoring would be through the Gorge Refuge stewards. And honestly, I'm just not familiar with exactly what they might be doing. But that'd be a great group to reach out to, both for if you're interested in doing community monitoring and if you're interested in, volunteering in the future to do plantings or, plant maintenance or trail maintenance, things like that. They're super active. They're a great group. I'm sure there's some overlap in membership between you guys and them.
A new question, which I guess is really important. How many parking spots are going to be in the new parking lot?
There'll be more than the old one. So the old one had 20 spots. This one will have 30. So it is a larger parking lot. I don't know, maybe still not enough. I know it gets a popular spot, but there will be more than at least there were last go around.
So I think we got through all the questions that people had. Thank you so much for answering all those questions and giving us this update. It's really great to see how this changed. I'm so excited to see how the refuge changed over time. So thank you for telling us about it. And because I know a lot of our members are at we're going to Steigerwald all the time. So it's really fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. There, when you come back out, there's still some areas that are, I think one of the last thing I'll say is it's really interesting. There are some parts of the refuge that we restored 2 years ago, some we restored a year ago, and some we just finished up. So the areas that still look pretty raw are in the very early stages of recovery, and the ones that are 2 years old, you can barely see that we were ever there. So hopefully folks will take some time to think through kind of the timing and sort of the rates of recovery and kind of pay attention to it as it recovers and regenerates over the next several years. So that's one of the things that honestly we're really excited to share with the public.
Will you have like informational signs about that kind of stuff? Like this is newly planted, or this has been planted 2 years ago,
I hope so. Yeah. We had talked to the Fish and Wildlife about getting some signs out like that. So I think we're gonna try to do something like that. Hopefully they'll follow up. But yeah, and if we don't, we're gonna have some guided tours. The first month or so that it's open. So definitely feel free to ask questions, and then when you get the answer, share them with your friends, if nothing else.
Yeah. I love the idea of guided tours, and also those having little signs so people can know just more about what happened here and why it's the way it is. I think those are always really nice to read.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay. I think awesome. Everybody is congratulating you on your excellent presentation. And with that, I don't control the stream quite as much anymore. So Don can do all the stuff for us, but thank you so much.